What's up, strugglers? New spring merch got me feeling good. Strugglershop.com if you want to get some stuff. Thank you very much. So a couple of months ago, I posted this sketch to my second channel called Every Old Show Does This Now. That was kind of poking fun at the fact that so many podcasts have been popping up where the cast or creators of a TV show are like rewatching old episodes and then talking about them. The Rewatch podcast, if you will. And you must. And to be fully transparent, that video was inspired by the new Ned's Declassified and Wizards of Waverly Place podcasts that I keep seeing clips from. I seriously cannot open the YouTube app without seeing Jennifer Stone's face. Okay, it haunts me. But I've also known about things like Office Ladies and Welcome to Our Show. What I didn't know is just how many of these podcasts there actually are. Like, just off the top of my head, I know of Parks and Rec, West Wing, Glee, Community, Psych, Scrubs. If you just search on Google Rewatch podcast, this huge list pops up, and it doesn't even include all of the shows that I personally know of. It's not some little niche trend, is what I'm trying to say, in as many words as possible. It's very widespread. Okay, it's an epidemic, and it must be stopped. And you may be thinking, Scott, don't you kind of do something like this at the end of the year with your really long year-end recap videos? Is this not just the pot calling the kettle something you can boil water in? And to that, I would say, I was literally joking, dude. Like the recap videos, I was kidding. I wasn't even being serious, dude. Shut up. I asked my Instagram and Twitter followers what their opinions were on Rewatch podcasts in general, and a lot of them seemed to think that Office Ladies were the ones that started the trend. Oh, no. They've been doing their thing since 2019, and maybe they boosted it in popularity, but this has been around since at least 2014 with Gilmore Guys. Gilmore Guys is obviously based on Kyle XY. And really, if you think about it, people like Andy Cohen have been doing this type of thing for much longer than even that. If you want to be a nerd about it. Oh man, wait. So then does that mean that reality show reunion episodes are technically rewatch podcasts? Dude, how deep does this go? Before podcasts, we used to just talk about our favorite shows with our friends in real life. We'll just set a limit here, otherwise we're going to get lost in the sauce. I think we could specify episode by episode rewatch podcasts that are hosted by people that are directly associated with the show. So not like a fan-hosted podcast, more so maybe somebody who starred on the show. Let me start by saying that I myself love reminiscing. A lot of my videos incorporate stories from my childhood, and a lot of what I do here uses nostalgia, obviously. So I'm not a hater, just an observer, okay? PodCo is the name of the company that's behind some of the more recent rewatch podcasts that have popped up, specifically the ones that have to do with old Nickelodeon or Disney Channel shows. Here's the company's website. Okay, so it's a scary thing. Not a lot of information here. Nary a hamburger menu in sight. Hey, it's VoiceOver Scott here. Literally a couple days later, they actually did update the website, so there's some more information on here, and it shows, which podcasts are part of the network here. Very nice little flippy menu. And it does actually give a little bit more information about what PodCo is. It's a podcast network started by Brendan Rooney and the Christy Carlson Romano, who you might know as Ren from Even Stevens, or, possibly Kim Possible. And PodCo are the ones that fund these shows. So, they build the sets, supply the SM7Bs, podcast stuff. And Christy actually has a podcast of her own called Vulnerable, where she sits down with mainly other people who grew up in the entertainment industry as well, and they talk about how that impacted them and what their lives became because of that. It's pretty interesting. And then out of that spawned these other rewatch podcasts. Thus, the Ned's Declassified Podcast Survival Guide and Wizards of Waverly Pod were born, followed by even more Stevens and Brotherly Love. If you have a soft spot in your heart for these shows or the actors that were on those shows, then golly, you might enjoy listening to them talk about them. I've only seen a couple of clips here and there from these two, but I have spent a not insignificant amount of time watching the other two, so those are the shows I'll focus on. And these two podcasts, although very similar in style and goals, I think, have very distinctly different vibes from each other. First, we gotta address the elephant in the room, okay? Buddy, you gotta start knocking before you come in here, man. It's creepy when you just sneak around like that.
I want to watch you record.
Okay, just sit in the chair, okay? Thank you. Okay, now let's address the 800-pound gorilla. Marcus, I will take you on a walk when I'm done. Please, can I just finish this video? Thank you. Now let's address the obvious. Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide starred Devin Werkheiser, Lindsay Shaw, and Daniel Curtis Lee. And good gravy, those three are also the hosts of the podcast. Cool. Now let's take a look at Wizards of Waverly Place. Okay, right. The podcast is hosted by these two. Random. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's just a weird pairing on paper. When I think Wizards of Waverly Place, my mind doesn't go directly to these two. Maybe yours does. Mine does not. Mine goes directly to this guy. And I know this isn't anybody's fault, but Variety put out this article when the podcasts were first announced, and the image they use has Shia LaBeouf, Selena Gomez, and Devin Werkheiser. But Shia and Selena aren't hosting these podcasts. All I'm saying is this goes to show you what people are kind of expecting to see when they hear these shows. So a moment ago I said that the two shows have different vibes. Okay, what did I mean by that? Well, from what I've seen so far, the Ned's cast seems to have very fond memories of working on the show. They're very bright and positive, and they seem happy with basically every aspect of their time working for Nickelodeon. And a lot of the time during the podcast is actually spent talking about things other than the show itself. Most of the time of the podcast is actually spent talking about not the show. And some people might see that as a negative on a Rewatch podcast, and I totally get that. But I kind of like the way that they go about it, where they're briefly just touching on notes that they took. You know, they watched the show, they came back, they took a couple of notes, they covered it. They touch on some memories from working on that episode, a couple of tidbits here and there. But then they move on to just chatting like friends would. They tell stories from their lives after the show. They talk about a lot of life that just didn't happen on set. And they seem like they're just buds hanging out. Lindsay refuses to wear shoes. They're just chilling. And my brain immediately goes, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, what, you gonna talk for an hour about a 20-minute episode of a Nickelodeon show? Do we need that? Contrast that with the Wizards of Waverly Pod. These two seem incredibly nice. They seem like they would be so great to have a conversation with, and they also seem very grateful to have been on the show. And who wouldn't be? It was huge. I would be so grateful to have been on a show like that myself. But have you ever had a conversation with somebody who... Hi, that sentence that you just heard originally ended with me saying, have you ever had a conversation with somebody who peaked in high school? But the more I sit and think about this, I don't actually think that that's true or fair to say. Me, from a couple of days ago, in that beautiful, wonderful green crew neck, that guy's a moron, okay? No, I've just spent more time with these shows. I've spent more time thinking on it, and my opinions have changed a little bit, so I will pop in periodically to update you on those. But for now, just know that going forward in this video, my opinions about the podcasts were kind of more thinking in terms of just general entertainment and not specifically about what they actually are meant to be, which is a rewatch podcast. So my bias towards the Ned's crew was simply just that I think I liked that show better. The Wizards podcast is actually a better rewatch podcast, objectively. They actually talk about the show. So just keep that in mind as this video progresses. Okay, let's get back to it. And they also, I mean, they basically beg for a reboot to happen. I think that's why they're doing the podcast, because they really want a reboot of Wizards of Waverly Place to happen. And like, reboots suck ass. Like nobody likes reboots. That's like a thing. It's so impossibly hard for that to recapture the magic, pun absolutely intended. This is another thing that I've thought more about. So much media that is being made now, and that has been being made for the last like decade at least, is some kind of reboot. So maybe reboots don't inherently suck ass, as I so eloquently put it earlier, but there is a big stigma around them. The idea of a reboot seems to get people a little annoyed. Like, here we go again. Another one? We're rebooting Spider-Man again? You gotta be kidding me. That doesn't mean that they're always bad results. It just means that the thought of doing it again can be exhausting to the consumer. Okay, back to it, green guy. And the Ned's crew desperately wants a reboot as well, to be clear.
In 5, 6, 7, 8, I
am ready to be a hater.
It's just the way that they talk about it that feels a lot different to me. At one point, Devin had mentioned actually writing and pitching a new show to the network and taking actual steps to try to get a reboot made. So at least it seems like there's some effort going into it there. I think there actually might be a market for a more mature survival guide type of show. I think that is something that makes sense to me, at least. And to be fair, there have definitely been times when the Ned's Declassified pod group do seem a little bit sad about the lack of work that they've been getting since the success of the show. And it's easy to look at all of these in general and just say like, oh, they're clinging to the past. These people are holding on for dear life to the past, you know? Whatever they got to do to stay relevant. Oh, podcasts are a thing? Let's do a podcast. And I don't think it's that simple. And I want to try to be fair to the Wizards hosts here too. I think while it can definitely be unhealthy to live in the past, you know, not be able to move forward, that's not a good thing. It can also be good and fun and entertaining to revisit really big pivotal moments in your life. Imagine for a second being a main character on a hugely successful TV show. And you do have to imagine it because you didn't do that. Imagine how that might, whether you wanted to or not, kind of define who you are for a very long time, if not the rest of your life. I can see how it could be very tempting to keep that as a part of you kind of forever going forward. Maybe not the main part of you or the only part of you by any means, but to keep it a part of you at least. It's hard enough for an actor to escape the shadow of a successful character. And it's not always the actor's fault for that. Like sometimes maybe the actor's just not good enough. Maybe they were a child star and they were cute, and then they grow up and they're just not a good enough actor to keep getting roles. Totally valid. But the industry itself is really weird about child stars anyway. And I gotta say, Christy is a very commendable voice in this discussion. She's been super vocal about like the predatory nature of the entertainment industry, especially as it relates to child stars. A lot of the conversations from herself focus on like shedding a light, I guess, on the seedier side of the business, which is a good thing. It's good that she's doing that. And as Christy has highlighted in some podcasts, the people that were in charge of these kids, or maybe not even so, kids, whatever. These young actors, the people that were in charge of their careers, kind of, they looked to discard them as soon as the cash cow dried up. Sucky agents and management that would just move on from whatever was old, they're old news. If we can't turn you into a pop star sensation, then we're just gonna move on to the new young, cute, oh, look at this person. Oh, look at this new star, rising star, right? So I do absolutely see these rewatch podcasts as a way for actors to put themselves back into the public eye a little bit. They've already got a hook, we know who they are. I know who Ned is, look at that. That's Cookie. That's Cookie. Look at Cookie. Now through the podcast, we get to learn a little bit more about them. Maybe this results in a bump in their personal popularity, and maybe a casting agent thinks, all right, yeah, Cookie, let's have him read for a role. It's so easy to think of it in a cynical way, as a consumer. You're like, oh, they're milking it, man. They're just milking it. But I don't know, it seems like maybe in a lot of cases, this is what they have, and they've got to use what they have to try to further their career. I don't know. I actually saw a comment on the sketch that I was talking about earlier. They were critiquing kind of the way that the conversations go on these podcasts. They say they miss it so much and then tell, quote, tragic stories behind the scenes, but they are so vague about it, it's hard to care. Like, am I supposed to feel sorry for you or feel nostalgic? Are we romanticizing childhood or ruining it? It can't go both ways at the exact same time. And I absolutely understand that sentiment. It can feel like you're getting whipped back and forth a little bit when the hosts go from talking about how lost and confused they were as a child in this adult world, and then the next thing they're talking about is like all these fun parties that they went to. I personally have a lot of great memories from when I was in school, for example, but there are also a lot of memories when everything seemed like it was just going wrong and it was never going to get better and I was just stuck in this awful fog. And both of those things can be true at the same time. And in any normal conversation with my friends, you're not like, you only focus on the good things, you only focus on the bad things. A normal conversation, you're incorporating everything. So for an outsider looking in, it's easy to pick apart these conversations as being hypocritical. But everybody's hypocritical, okay? Except for me, okay? I could never be a hypocrite. How dare you? So all that being said, there are so many more rewatch podcasts that exist that I could not even begin to care about. I have listened to some clips here and there from others, but I really don't have any interest in investing more time into a show than the show itself. I got stuff going on, you know? There's so much good stuff to see. I don't necessarily feel like I want to be rehashing the same thing over and over all the time. Unless it's Jake and Amir watch Jake and Amir, then you can inject that directly into my veins forever until the end of time, okay? That's funny. But I did ask my viewers what their opinions were on the Rewatch podcasts that they watch, and most of them tended to have the same general sentiment about stuff, so I've got a little list here. They can lean a little bit too heavily into nostalgia, okay? The hosts are what make or break the show, so if they don't have good chemistry with each other, it doesn't really matter, it's not gonna work. And the host doesn't necessarily have to be the star of the show for that to be the case. As long as they're knowledgeable and passionate about it, that's kind of all that matters. Fan-hosted shows can actually feel more genuine. I totally get that as well. You can feel a real love for the project coming out in a fan podcast, maybe a little bit more so than something where it's like, hey, I was on this show. Remember me? A lot of people said that they feel like they're mainly cash grabs, but that makes, they're harmless in that way. You're still choosing to give your time to them. So a lot of people said that these can come off as kind of desperate. I get that. And then another point that I saw a lot was that these podcasts don't have any staying power because once they get through the show, what else is there to do? And yes, I understand that for sure, but a lot of these shows have like a TV show would have a lot of episodes. And if you're doing a weekly podcast, even if it's like, oh, this show has 50 episodes, that's a full year's worth of a podcast. And then maybe they can offshoot that into something else after if they built an audience out of it. So I don't know about the staying power thing. So, not to say that you guys are wrong, but I'm right. So a lot of this has been kind of the more critical sentiment, right? But why do people like watching these? And people must like, listening to them because they're spreading like freaking crabgrass. Okay, we have crabgrass in our yard and it gets me heated just thinking about it. Office Ladies, for example, is a wildly popular podcast. At least it was a few years ago when it first started. I haven't heard much about it lately, but they're still chugging away, man. Seems like they fully intend on getting through every episode of The Office. I salute you in your efforts. That's, man. Fans of the podcast might say things like, oh, I love hearing behind the scenes stories from my favorite episodes. I really like hearing about what it was like on set during some of the funniest scenes in the series. It's cool when they bring on guests like writers or other crew members. Like, that's fun to hear other people's perspective. The one Rewatch podcast that kept coming up in terms of positive feelings towards it is the Always Sunny pod. And the main reason is because the show is still being made. It's hosted by Glenn Howerton, Rob McElhenney, and Charlie Day, who are the stars of the long-running sitcom It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. But they're also the creators and head writers on the show. So while other podcasts that might be hosted by an ended show's side character can still be fun and interesting to listen to, the Always Sunny pod has the added benefit of being able to give insight on past and future episodes. They share their thought process on how and why certain decisions are made, and all the info is coming directly from the people who are actually in charge. It feels less like, in the most respectful way, out-of-work actors reliving the glory days, and more like a genuine look into the mind of how a show is created. And again, both things are valid regardless, and they're both totally fine forms of entertainment if you're into it, but they are extraordinarily different. The cynic in me keeps wanting to come out. It keeps wanting to give this negative opinion and be like, Rewatch podcasts are just like a 40-year-old who keeps talking about his golden years playing high school football. But then the optimist in me wants to say, at least they're not cornering me at the local bar and making me listen to their stories. So is the trend of Rewatch podcasts really a plague? No. Of course it's not, obviously not. Oh, but the title of the video, grow up. They can and do also offer a lot of fun insight into stuff that a lot of people do care about. If you had this delicious meal prepared and you ate it and it was like, wow, that was so good, my favorite meal of all time. If somebody then offered a little bit more of that meal, hey, you want a little bit more of that meal? What do you think? That, I think, would be pretty neat. And a lot of people might be into that.
When you're older, you see how complicated and tough life is. And I think when your identity is up and down, when you feel insecure about life, nostalgia is a sweet, sweet medicine.
But as with pretty much everything on the internet, the beauty is, if you're not into it, if you're not one of those people that likes it, you just don't have to listen. God bless you, folks. Everybody gets so mad at me when I like show both sides of stuff. They're like, oh, pick a firm stance on something. You have to hate Planet Fitness, man. Thank you so much for watching. I think I'd like to make a prediction here. What's the next show that's gonna have a podcast pop up? I think it'll be, oh boy, this is tough. If there isn't already one that exists, I'm just riffing here. I think it'll be My Name is Earl, and it'll be hosted by the crab guy. What's his name? Darnell? It'll be hosted by Darnell and Catalina. And it'll be a smash hit. What do you think, huh? What are your thoughts? What's gonna be next?
Big Time Rush, and it's gonna be hosted by the record label guy.
Ooh, good one, good one. Marcus just wants to go on a walk. All right, we'll go. Extra thank you to my patrons. Those that are listed here are in the top tier on there. You guys, we should start a podcast. We'll all just talk at the same time. It'll be absolute chaos, and it'll be #1 on the Spotify charts. All right, that's all I got for you. Thank you so much. If you'd like to, you can watch another video. Go ahead, watch another one. You know, you have my permission. New merch, struggleshop.com. All right, you get it. All right. Goodbye, guys. See ya.
Here.
God was just like, let's go.
Yeah. Coming up, looking out, I'll survive, no doubt. Never fear.